The four horsemen are the Antichrist, war, economic collapse, and death. Those are the four horsemen. They're all in chapter 6 of Revelation. Those are the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Welcome, everyone, to podcast number 225, Renew Your Mind. With us today, we have Senior Pastor Paul Gruenberg. We have Pastor Jeremy Touroo. We have our praise band leader and also youth and family director, Jordan Kettlewell. Myself, Dana Hall, is the moderator. And we have a very special guest, Cindy Miller, who has created a Bible study on Revelation. And that's the series of podcasts that we're in right now. We're discussing Revelation. So today we are going to, I believe we're going to talk through chapters 5 through 8. And there's 4 different themes that we're going to touch on. I think we wanted to start with the 4 horsemen.
So we've heard about the 4 horsemen. I remember Billy Graham wrote a book about the 4 horsemen. That is something that you can see thematically, maybe in movies occasionally. Tell us a little bit more about what these 4 horsemen are or what they represent, Cindy.
Okay, the 4 horsemen are the Antichrist, war, economic collapse, and death. Those are the 4 horsemen. Now, the first one in chapter 6, they're all in chapter 6 of Revelation. Okay. Those are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And a lot of people think, like Willoughby, when during World War I, the war to end all wars. Yeah, right. The Antichrist, Willoughby rode into Jerusalem on a white horse. Okay, I'm not sure that was his name, actually.
And that's the first horse that's listed as the white horse.
Right, but a lot of people equate that with him riding in on World War I. And then war is the second horseman, and there was World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Iraq, all of those different wars that followed. And now we're in the Gaza and Ukrainian wars.
When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him who was given a large sword. And then moving on to the next horse, which you're about to talk about. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in its hands. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wage, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wage, and do not damage the oil and the wine."
Ugh. But yeah, that economic collapse, a lot of people equate that with the Great Depression, but that happened before World War II. And I went to the market the other day, and a dozen eggs is $7 here in California, which is ridiculous.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So talk about economic collapse. I think that's coming.
Maybe we'll stay here in the cold then.
Yeah. Trump promises that he'll fix that, but who knows? Anyway.
Do the horses have to, even though the horses are stated that they come in this order, do they really have to come in that order?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the point. Like I say, people say this third horse is the Great Depression, which is before too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, before World War II. Mm-hmm. So, but supposedly, and then the last one, death, that supposedly right now there's 7 billion people on Earth, or 7 or 8 billion.
Pretty close, yeah.
But there's a movement that says that the earth cannot support that many people, and that a lot of people need to just die. So I don't know.
And this is the pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was followed close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. So when that fourth horse comes, a quarter of all the inhabitants on earth, according to this verse, they're going to be no more.
That's a fourth of the geography of the earth, not a fourth of the population of the earth, but a fourth of on the geography of the earth, it says.
Yeah,
Okay.
fourth of the earth, yeah. So that is the fourth seal. So the first four seals of the seven seals that are coming are being opened one by Jesus. And as he opens each seal on the scroll, something happens. Something is released upon the earth. So when you get to the fifth seal, it talks about under the altar, the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and brothers who were to be killed as they had been was completed. So who are all of these people regarding the fifth seal who are under the altar?
I believe it's the saints of God. They're being martyred.
Would that be people who have been martyred since the time of Christ, or would that include Old Testament prophets that were martyred, or the Israelites or the Hebrews that had been martyred in the name of God?
Well, yeah.
It doesn't say specifically.
Right. You brought up the question of chronology, and like I said, it promises at the end that will rule and reign with Christ. Those who have been martyred will be resurrected and raptured, and then rule and reign with him for 1,000 years on earth. So I don't know exactly.
This is the interesting part about Revelation. Again, it's got some verses that state some plain stuff, but you can interpret this in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were a pre-tribber, somebody who believed in a pre-trib rapture, the souls would be the people who died since the rapture, who were martyred for remaining faithful in Christ. That's how they might interpret that. So, and then of course the white for the robe is purity, represents purity and holiness. And then he moves to the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth as late figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The sky receded like a scroll rolling up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and every slave and every free man hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?" So that's the sixth seal. There's actually, based on what John is seeing, there's a great earthquake along it seems to be the entire earth. There's a blood red moon, we've heard of that. But the stars fall from the sky. Is that all the stars? Back when this was written, the stars just kind of hung up there. We didn't know that they were light years away. And so what might that represent for us, Cindy?
the stars and I think that 6 represents a preview of the trumpets and bowls. I think, and it sounds very similar to what the bowls describe later on, the men calling on the mountains to fall on them and so on.
Okay, so this might be a preview of something that gets more specific later on in Revelation.
Right.
Okay, so chapter 7, moving to that, there are 4 angels at the corners of the earth holding back the 4 winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or the sea or any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. And then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. Now that's really interesting because this looks like it's talking about Israelites, but what about everyone else? Do they not, those who believe, are they already gone? Or are the 144 that remain? Or is this just kind of just talking about Israel, but not really talking about the rest of believers?
I think it's talking about the tribes of Israel, but 12,000 from each tribe it talks about. But the 5th seal is the martyrdom of the saints, and then this is Israelites. So they're especially sealed and protected from death during the 7 years. I think the saints were killed before, and then the Israelites, this 12,000 from each tribe of Israel, are specially sealed, and those become the witnesses of that testify to the rest of the world after the saints have been martyred.
So with that, then you're suggesting that all other Christians who are not Jewish or Christians who believe in Jesus, they're already out of the picture. They've been taken up into heaven.
Right. But these 144,000 Israelites are also Messianic Jews. They believe in Jesus also.
Now, would they have just come to know Jesus? Because there are plenty of Messianic Jews now that are believers. I'm sure there's more than 12,000 from each of the tribes that are already Messianic Jews.
Right. But this is 12,000 from each tribe.
Okay. Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses claim that this represents all of humanity and that the 144,000 have filled up heaven and that God is going to create a new place for all the other believers.
That's not true. There's far more than 144,000 in heaven. Far more.
Right, when you count from the beginning of the time of Christ. And that's not even counting the Old Testament.
Beginning of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. And then it moves on to talk in terms of the great multitude in white robes. After this, I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count from every nation. So to me, that's more than 144,000.
Right.
Tribe, people, and language standing before the throne in front of the Lamb, and they were wearing white robes again, signifying purity and holiness, and were holding palm branches in their hands. What's the image that comes to mind when you read that? The triumphal entry of Christ. The palm branches. And they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." And everyone just begins. This is really just a scene of worship for the rest of chapter 7. And then it gets to the 7th seal and the golden censer. So when he opened up the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, And to them were given 7 trumpets. Another angel who had a golden censer. And a censer is, if you've been in we had a couple of Orthodox funerals recently at the church. The priest had a censer, and in it was burning coals. So there was smoke as a part of the funeral. Angel's going to have a golden censer, stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of the saints, went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. What do we do with that?
Well, I think most of the saints will have already been martyred, and the 144,000 are sealed, protected from death. So, I think that are subject to this are the unsaved.
Okay, I'm sorry, Cindy, go ahead and say that again.
The evil people on earth.
Are the ones who remain.
Right.
Okay, so you have the 144,000 Israelites that are on earth, and they're protected, they're sealed. And then you have the remaining population who are unsaved. Now, I don't know, does this happen before the 3.5-year period? Because my understanding was that first 3.5 years, there would be peace.
Peace. Yeah, I think the 5th seal happens probably at the 3.5-year point. Yeah.
Okay, and that's the time of the desecration of the temple.
Right.
Okay. So just going back a little bit, Cindy, when we look at the potential for a timeline, the first timeline that's happened in our lifetime, or for some of us, is that Israel formed a nation. That was a marker that said we're advancing towards the end times. And then the next big marker will be, there could be 2 things. One would be, nope, I can't go there yet. So Israel has a timeline, and then there's, at the beginning of that 7 years, Israel makes peace with all its enemies.
Right. I think that the Psalm 83 war is happening right now, where Israel is fighting all of the Palestinian countries surrounding it, starting with Hamas and then Hezbollah and Iran and all of those countries around. But God, in Genesis chapter 15, verse 18, God promises all of the land from the Nile to the Euphrates to Moses, or to Abraham, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that is going to be fulfilled after this war.
So with this land, promise of land, the original promise of what Abraham would inherit, right now, Israel constitutes what percentage of that land, would you say? 50%?
No, nowhere near. Maybe 5% at most. Very tiny. Israel is very tiny. And eventually it will include half of Egypt, all of Lebanon, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia is, I believe, where the Israelites wandered for 40 years, not just the Sinai. So, and Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia, not just in the Sinai. So,
so with that, Cindy, with that, then you might see the next big movement. So for a lot of Christians, they're unaware of the geopolitical happenings around the world and how that might be played out in Revelation. And you're saying right now that the next real marker toward coming to the end times is going to be a peace accord where Israel has all of the promised land that was promised to Abraham.
Right. And they will be the greatest power on earth then, and then they will make a covenant with the European leader, whoever he turns out to be.
Okay, so that would be the peace accord. And in today's geopolitical standing, Israel, there's a big, one of the precursors to the current Israeli Hezbollah-Hamas war was that Israel was about to sign a peace agreement of types with Jordan and Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And as a result,
Right.
Hezbollah and Hamas attacked Israel, and that thwarted that agreement from being signed. So we see some things happening that might be the next marker. So in that, then, I think we should come to a conclusion
Right.
of this podcast and look toward the next podcast as we continue to advance on the trumpets.
All right. So with that, thank you everyone for listening. We come to you from the Gaylord Methodist Church. We're located on 215 South Center Street in Gaylord, Michigan. We have 2 services on Sunday. We have a 9 a.m. traditional, 10:45 contemporary. Also, every second and fourth Wednesday, we have a 7:15 p.m. service. It's a little more informal question-answer just format. We'd love to have you in person, but if you can't come in person, you can view us via Facebook or YouTube. And if you have any questions, you can call our office at 989-732-5380, or you can Google us and check out our website. We also have a chili cook-off coming up on February 9th, and we'd love to have you join us for that, either as a participant or a taste tester. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you, or at least hearing from you at the next podcast. Thanks, everyone.